Morning, everybody. We're really pleased to be able to come before you today. We really have been giving a lot of thought to what we want to share with you today to make this special. So that's how we're going to start off. First of all, we want to introduce ourselves, a little bit about ourselves. We have some demographics up here we'll share with you, and then we'll get right to our presentation today. But a couple comments I wanted to make before we introduce the panel, and that is we chose this topic because we're all in this together. We're all trying our best to deliver quality education to our students. And even in looking at the title of our presentation today, it's kind of like when we're trying to develop an essential question for a lesson. We've changed that topic title a couple times. And the one you see listed is not the one that we're going to present. The one we're presenting is providing equitable education during COVID-19. So that's kind of our essential question that we want to get to. And in just a couple minutes, Dr. Williard and Mr. Purdy, who are managing the PowerPoint today, will be doing a little bit of a needs assessment with us. Now, we recognize that equity is at the heart of all we deliver in education during this pandemic. And quite frankly, that needs to be the focus in our post-COVID era. There are schools that were literally caught off guard when we were thrown into the remote learning last March, and many are still struggling to make the transition to blended learning or even a fully remote online learning. Now, today's presentation will focus on two of the larger CTE systems that are feeling the growing pains of striving to deliver quality instruction. However, we are seeing successes through our efforts, and we have learned much in a short period of time. Now, we're going to focus on our story and hopefully leave you with some helpful tips as we all navigate through the educational nuances of this pandemic. We will be monitoring the chat room and we'll have as our goal to answer your questions throughout the presentation. One thing is for sure, as a result of the education delivery and our growing pains in the midst of this pandemic, our schools are going to be forever changed. Now at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Williard and we'll do our introductions.
All right, thank you, Dr. Kraft. I appreciate that. As he indicated, I'm Kirk Williard. I am the director of the Career Technical and Customized Education Division for the Chester County Intermediate Unit, and I oversee our 3 technical college high schools that are providing CTE for the students in our 12 districts in Chester County.
And I'm Jim Kraft. I'm the executive director of Berks Career and Technology Center.
Good morning. My name is Dave Purdy. I'm an assistant principal at TCHS Brandywine.
Morning, everybody. My name is Mike Stauffer. I'm the Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment, and also the East Campus Principal at the Berks Career and Technology Center.
All right, great. Thank you. So one of the things I think is always important, and please know, I mean, and Jim made some outstanding introductory comments. One of the things I want to make sure is that you see this as an opportunity for you to ask questions. That, you know, in any sort of presentation, there's always an opportunity at the end to ask questions. But we would really like you to put your questions in the chat. We're going to be monitoring them so that we can make sure that as we're talking about what we consider to be each of our case studies throughout this process, we want to make sure that we can help address some of the questions you might have that might be a little more specific to your center, to your educational setting, whatever that might be. But we wanted to start out this morning just to kind of generate some thinking around, you know, what drew you to this presentation? You know, what sparked your interest? What do you hope to learn? And if you could put some of those things in the chat, we're going to keep looking at those so that we can make sure that we're going to answer some of your questions. So if you can, you know, think about, you know, what drew you to this? What were you hoping for? What did you want to be able to take away as a little bit of an opportunity to implement or utilize within your own settings? Go to the next slide, please.
Lou?
We thought it was important just to provide some demographic on the 2 centers and from the folks you're hearing from today. You can see that given the districts that we're serving, we're pretty consistent from an enrollment perspective and really from a program perspective as well, even though we are in different areas of the state. We just thought it would be helpful for you to see our student enrollment and where we are as far as a part-time and non-comprehensive, both of our systems are providing.
So one of the things we've been discussing an awful lot is what our priorities should be. And so to try to get a better feel from each of you, we're curious and asking you to give us some feedback in terms of how you prioritize 5 issues that have certainly been at the forefront of this crisis. So if you wouldn't mind using the chat to just list in order, equity, PD, staffing, health considerations, and communication, and understanding that it's a chat. So if you want to use this shorthand PD instead of professional development, we totally get that. But just trying to get a feel for within your schools, what the priorities have been. And now that I think about it, and gentlemen, jump in if I missed this, but I don't know if we could easily list those in a top 5 in order. It gets tougher when you're asked to rank them. Shelley, I noticed the chat. Equity is certainly a huge one. I think one of the things we've observed is the inequities that exist in education have been really brought to the forefront in the past 7 months. Excellent. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, keep those coming in as we continue to go throughout, and you'll see as we talk about our case studies and our approaches and how, you know, there may have been priorities as we started this journey, but things may have changed as the ever changing or evolution of the pandemic has been for all of us as well.
I'm going to jump ahead, but keep using the chat though. It's great. Thank you. Appreciate all the feedback.
Okay, I guess we'll move into slide 5, which is a little bit of a glimpse of what led us up to the March 13th, Friday the March 13th. How can we ever forget that date in history, right? It's indelible to all of us, shutdown. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background from Berks Current Technology Center. First of all, I wanted to let you know that we had teachers about 4 years ago that started downloading a free version of a learning management system called Schoology. Now, there's a lot of learning management systems out there, and I'm not here to, or any of us here to promote one specific learning management system. But the teachers brought forward to us some really great benefits in moving their curriculum into an LMS environment. And in a couple minutes, Dr. Stauffer can elaborate a little bit more detail from the BCTC standpoint. But this is about 4 years ago. And they came to the administration, and we supported those teachers. And about 2-3 years ago, we actually bought into it and decided to purchase the full license for Schoology. And we had some teachers that were, you know, the technology integrators that were moving full speed ahead, and we had some folks that were still holding on to more of the traditional delivery systems. And as we moved into last school year, and I'm saying it was the summer of 2019, we made a goal that we wanted to get all of our teachers, because there was just a few out there that weren't using an LMS. We wanted to bring them on board to at least a baseline use of a learning management system. So we had professional development scheduled all last year to get folks to that point. But I can honestly say that when March 13th hit, we hit the fast forward button at BCTC. And again, Dr. Stauffer is going to comment on that. Another thing that we were doing, and we took 2 years to do this, we were using Classmate as our student information system, or SMS, student management system. And we had decided that it was becoming antiquated and we wanted to move forward. So we had a committee that was looking at that. So around January of last year, we actually started training with a complete transformation to a new SIS system that was to occur this past summer, which we're still on board with, and he can comment on that as well. So these are kind of the background things that have occurred that led up to this, which gave us a little bit, I guess, of an advantage of moving into the remote learning environment, but we certainly were not there. And so at this point, I want to just turn it over to a technical college high school, so you can tell us a little bit about your background.
Thank you, Jim. And what I appreciate seeing in the chat as I've watched the ranking of those areas, you know, it goes back and forth between communication and equity in those top 2 slots. So thank you for keeping that going. And I very vividly remember March 13th. We were actually having a superintendent pre-pandemic summit where we were talking about how might we have to respond, and then all of a sudden the quick rollout from the Department of Education and the governor's office became apparent. And when I remember that day is that we realized that it happened after our lunch time frame, which being a shared time, we're a half-day turnabout with our programs. We knew that we had our AM students that left the building and did get an opportunity to take some of the things with them that would support some of their learning within the programs. And we really focused quickly on that equity piece. We knew from a technology perspective, we needed to gear up with our staff, but we also needed to make sure that students and families were going to have the technology that they might need in order to facilitate this virtual online type of environment. And we got so creative that we utilized one of our vans and really set up a mobile Wi-Fi within that vehicle and traveled to different areas within the communities that through surveys, we realized that students and families were not able to get access. And while the demographics of Chester County economically is a very capable county. It's one of the top 2 in the state from an economics perspective. But even in that environment, we have pockets throughout Chester County of families that have those needs. So that really drove us home into this idea of what can we and how can we deploy some of the technology we have in each of our buildings. And I have 3 campuses, and making sure that we could get that technology to our students, obviously in a health and safe manner. So we had to create schedules. How did students get that? How did we deliver it? How did we set up times for families to do drive-bys, and they were handed off, out on the sidewalk in front of the buildings. And we really got creative even with some of the materials that we had that we could help our community. The actual picture on that slide is a forklift loading some of the PPE that we were able to share with our community first responders, with fire departments, with hospitals. There were things that we knew that we could support the community in this initial response to what it was going to take. So we move on to the next slide, and I think we're back to Berks.
I want to elaborate as well. I see the chat room, and so I want to comment a little bit more about what we did in preparation leading up to March, and then we'll blend right into the first week or so in March, and Dr. Stauffer is going to take it from there. But we did have Java-like sessions. Our intermediate unit is fantastic to work with. I'll give a shout out to Dr. Jill Hackman, our executive director. She's great at organizing, collaborating, bringing our folks together. So we had meetings, I recall very vividly, in February into early March, that we were meeting frequently in these Java-like sessions. So the communications people were meeting, the IT people were meeting, the curriculum people were meeting, the principals were meeting, and we really were collaborating. And we're going to get into some of the benefits of coming through this era. But definitely communications is very strong, and we can give you some poignant examples of how that's been transforming what we do. So that was leading up to the preparation into the March week. Now, one of the things that we had to do really quickly as well was we decided we were going to modify our calendar. While the expectation pretty much was almost as if you had snow days, if you will. No learning taking place, no expectations. That kind of what was the message that was out there. We were already engaging behind the scenes to prepare for quality professional development. So we went back and modified our school calendar, and we had never done this before, but we actually added 2 Act 80 days during the initial shutdown. Where we had structured technology, our technology integrators, our teachers, our Schoology champions, if you will, where they actually presented to our groups of teachers in a very structured manner. Again, Dr. Stauffer, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you to elaborate on what we did.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Kraft. So again, talking a little bit about our Schoology champions. So our Schoology champions are mentors basically in the building. We have about 6 of them in each one of our campuses, and we have 2 campuses. And really what those folks were really our early adopters. And they were able to kind of really take the bull by the horns and really kind of jump in and push Schoology to its limits. And, you know, how we integrated it with Classmate at the time, which is now eSchool Data, and really just kind of challenge everything that, you know, we thought it could do, and how far can we push it, and what are the limits of it. So that went on for about a few years, as Dr. Kraft had stated earlier. And then beginning of last year, each year we develop school improvement goals. Each administrator is responsible for about 3 or 4 of them. And one of them that I was responsible for was the implementation of Schoology. And our goal was to lay out a 3-year plan. We would have a full implementation of Schoology across the entire campus. So again, looking within 3 years, 100% fully immersed, all learning activities, learning guides, all of our curriculum would be housed within Schoology, all being delivered through Schoology and all being graded through Schoology. So that was the goal in September of last year. Then we get to March and schools close, and we are in the process of now, how do we plan and deliver this instruction? Going into March 13th, we had about 50% of our staff that was really adept at using Schoology, and these Schoology champions played a really big role in making sure that they were able to do that, and were very comfortable doing so. So we immediately pulled them in as resources to start planning for professional development during those first 2 weeks of the buildings being closed. And we were able to design a professional development with an awful lot of input from not only our Schoology champions, but also our instructional coaches, and then also some other technology leaders that we had throughout the campuses. And what we needed to do was really take into consideration, one, how are we going to deliver this PD? Because it's the first time that we're not going to be face-to-face in front of one another. Not everybody was comfortable using Microsoft Teams yet. So we had to do some kind of background training and get them ready for that. But then what we were able to do with that PD was really target it and make it almost specific to an individual and where their levels were. So we broke everybody down into kind of beginning, intermediate, and advanced groupings, and based the trainings with Schoology on that. And so the whole idea was, at the end of that week of professional development, that everybody moved forward. And it depended where you were starting, but everybody was going to move forward and have a better understanding going into that first week of online instruction. So then, as we started to move into that, we needed to develop some teacher learning expectations, student expectations, so on and so forth. And we started to build out our continuity of education plan. And within that plan, with our very first draft, we had laid it out where there would be all the teacher training and professional development would take place between March 16th and the 27th of March. Then that very first week after that was going to take us to the end of the 3rd quarter. And the whole purpose of that was just to get all staff comfortable with kind of delivering assignments fully online, just doing enrichment, remediation, just some fun activities, just getting in the habit of being able to do that, setting up the expectations with students as when they should be logging on, and taking care of all of that. And then after that, we moved into the 4th quarter. And as soon as we moved into the 4th quarter, everything from there to the end of the school year, the expectation was all new content delivery. And I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to see the presentation just before this. 2 of our instructional coaches, Ms. Rudy and Mr. Stein, were really integral in helping our staff through that, and really working through some issues with them as far as delivering fully online virtual instruction. And in addition to that, we also have, about 25 instructional assistants throughout both campuses. And so once we kind of got the teachers moving forward, we needed to take a look at our instructional assistants. How can we utilize them? Because they're such a great resource to us in the classroom. And we knew that there had to be a way that we could leverage what they do for us in the classroom and modify that to a virtual environment. So what we were able to do with them was we were able to get them, again, trained on using Schoology, becoming very adept at using Schoology, using Microsoft Teams. They were then working with students one-on-one through Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams really gives the students a very easy ability to share screens, and the instructional assistant was then able to very seamlessly work through a lot of concerns, a lot of issues if they were struggling with a concept, and could actually see what they were working on. The other thing that we were able to create was a virtual learning resource room. So what we had set up was, and this was now through Schoology, if a student needed help and was in a class and a teacher was running a lecture or doing some kind of a theory demonstration and a student needed some one-on-one help, that teacher was able to virtually move that student to get one-on-one assistance with an instructional assistant in our virtual LRC through Schoology. So there were just some of the things that we that we utilized. Again, building from the Schoology champions and how it just kind of like snowballed and went from there. But again, as we were moving through this whole process, there were a lot of things that we found didn't work, and we just kept constantly adjusting to that. And I think that would be a good takeaway from this is, to know that it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to work great the first time. There's going to be issues. And, when you do have those things that don't go well, recognize it, accept it, challenge yourselves and your staff, and, learn from it and just move on, because we had a whole lot of instances like that, but we absolutely did learn a whole lot through that. Just going into a little bit with some of the collaboration and how we use Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams was a platform that we did have in place. We use that primarily for staff communication. And, if there's anything that we got out of or really, really learned from this whole process, this whole situation, was the importance of communication and collaboration. And not only have we gotten a whole lot better as an organization and really brought both campuses together, but we were able to really have our teachers really be a part of this entire process and help drive this, which is why I believe we had the buy-in that we did as we were moving through this. And in addition to that, Dr. Kraft, and I know he wants to address some of the issues at the countywide level, because there were, again, a lot of things that he was working through with our superintendents and with our IU. So Dr. Kraft, I'm not sure if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I did want to talk about the equity issue, because that was huge at the superintendent level. It was accessibility to the technology with students. And much like many of your schools and your counties, we still had folks that were, running off copies early on in March to June, and parents were picking up packets and that kind of thing. We did see there was a little more technology usage at the secondary level in our districts, but Wi-Fi, hotspots, all those things, they were just dominated our conversation. We were all very, very much concerned about equity. And I'm pleased to say that as we entered into the summer, that was pretty much resolved. One-on-one computers, whether it was Chromebooks, iPads, Macs, or PCs, the districts really did address that and made that a high priority. So I can honestly say, going into the start of the school year, we were in much better shape. But that March to June timeframe, yeah, equity was huge. It was a problem. We had accessibility issues. And being a Shared Time Career and Tech Center, we're not the local education agency, so we do rely on our 16 districts to solve a lot of those dilemmas. But we are very closely tied to that as well. So at this point, we're going to slide it back over to Technical College High School.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Doctor. Sorry.
Sorry, Dave. Just before Dave gets started, I just want to echo some of the things that Jim was talking about from the intermediate unit connection. We function within the Chester County Intermediate Unit, so we too had access to a lot of instructional technology, innovative educational solutions from a professional development perspective, and I would hope that that was a resource for all of you as well. I'm sure the IUs were instrumental in helping to provide support from a professional development perspective as well. Sorry, Dave.
That's quite all right. I'd made a note to mention that as well, that, from that March timeframe when we went into crisis mode educationally, the support from the IU was amazing, frankly, and the professional development offered to our staff. We're fortunate to have a virtual school run by our IU, and those instructors and admin were able to certainly help them with their online bag of tricks. One of the things as we moved towards the summer was, well, first of all, we operated on the premise that we believed we would be opening in a hybrid version of school, one way or another. But our first goal was we asked you to prioritize your list of 5. Our first goal was to come up with a sound health and safety plan. In order to do so, we had town halls, virtual town halls, obviously via Zoom, and really invited our stakeholders to various town halls, one for staff, for parents, for other school districts, for the superintendents, to get their input and feedback regarding what they felt comfortable with, what their level of comfort was with the health and safety plan, and how we could devise a health and safety plan that was going to provide for the best opportunity for our students to be here in a hybrid model, but at the same time, be safe in their environment. We're also fortunate in Chester County that we have a Chester County Department of Health. So we are working directly with them to develop a health and safety plan. It went through obviously numerous iterations. We had to examine our own infrastructure and what our capabilities were. However, having been here now for a full marking period and having students attending in a hybrid fashion, I believe the groundwork that was laid over the summer was very successful in creating a health and safety plan that minimized risk for everybody involved. So the next part was the communication piece, and that was huge, not only because of, frankly, Jim talked about equity, making sure we were able to communicate effectively with all of our stakeholders, but also making sure we were able to keep them up to date with what felt like never-ending changes from either the state level or the Chester County Department of Health in terms of what was acceptable and what was appropriate for our situation. So, much like Dr. Kraft mentioned, we were able to adjust our 2021 calendar to front load professional development days. We used a lot of those. We were able to get 5 days at the start of the year. A lot of that time was used to, frankly, work on the health and safety plan and make sure the procedures in place at the building level were effective, efficient, and safe. We, had, like many of you have, directionality for students and staff, staggered arrivals and dismissals, how to best provide safe distance for staff and students, but at the same time understanding that we're a career tech ed center and there's going to be times where students are working closer than 6 feet together. So how to do so safely. And then obviously, as mentioned, the Chester County Department of Health was a huge crutch to lean on in that situation. I would say daily communication was taking place with them in order to make sure we were following proper procedures as well. A couple other things I would point out is we had a strong team, but at the same time, the best part about our team was we're not all, I talked to Dr. Willer this morning about this, a team with 11 quarterbacks isn't a very good team. We had differing opinions. We had back and forth in terms of what was best and how to balance health and safety versus education and do so effectively for our students. And I found that back and forth led to, frankly, playing not necessarily devil's advocate, but the best possible plan for our students and our staff to be here safely. So that was a huge part of our team that I felt came to the forefront and really led to a better situation. I'm not saying it was always, sunshine and rainbows. It wasn't, but that aspect really led to solid, honest feedback from our staff, from our parents, from our students, and our districts. And that is what I believe led to the best plan we could come up with.
And I would reinforce that too. I mean, when you think about communication, you have to be willing to simply just listen sometimes. And we really did spend a great deal of time just listening to our students, our parents, our sending district administrative teams, and really each other internally, because with 3 buildings and 3 sets of administrators and then subtle nuances in each building, they sometimes necessitated a kind of a stronger collaboration and making sure that we were thinking about all areas. And if I could go back to the March to June timeframe, we really took a all hands on deck kind of approach. So instructional assistants, project staff, support staff, they all went through the same kind of professional development so they could support the learning process that we were delivering in those virtual environments. So they were able to support the students, but also support the teachers if and when there were times that they needed to be broken into smaller groups or working with other students within the program themselves.
I'm going to mention one more thing before I pass the baton off to the gentleman from BCTC. One of the, grassroots or input that we received from a teacher that was looking to create learning kits to send home. We talked about equity in terms of technology, but we had a a significant equity issue within our programs of students that may have an entire, tool set at home versus students that had nothing. And so putting together learning kits for our students with tools we had on hand. We didn't have to go and purchase anything, but tools that, of course, were sitting in an empty building were then sent home to students so that they could practice the hands-on skills that are vital to our programs. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to you and jump to the next slide, guys.
Well, I got to tell you, we're so much alike in how we approach this. It's really uncanny, but if I would go back to communications, one of the things we also did is we have an automated messenger system. At the beginning of the year, we asked parents if they would like to be notified, through communications through their cell phone primarily. And so we've been using that effectively. We started it we used it heavily in March through the end of the year, and we're still using that. And we normally do, we give them just a little bit of information, but we normally direct them to our school website for the more detailed information. So that's been huge as a communications device. It's really answered a lot of the questions. We also had a Q&A section on our website for parents. We put together the types of questions we were receiving with our answers to go with it, some of the more common questions. So that worked out really well. We also expanded communications with our faculty, and that's lasting to this day. So beginning in March, we used to have a faculty meeting at each of our campuses in person, and we started having joint faculty meetings with the campus principals, sharing the leadership role in those meetings. They had, at the end of each day, we had a time frame using Microsoft Teams for teachers to get on at a set time, and we were just there to listen, ask questions, answer, jot notes, get back to people. So that was just huge, and that is carrying over to today. I got to honestly say that's been huge. The other thing we did is we always do a needs assessment. We always do a survey of our staff at the end of the year. So we put together an additional survey that really had to do with the online learning, and we used the results of that survey over the summer months to make sure we were addressing the needs of our teachers. Now I'm going to give Dr. Stauffer some credit. He coined this term return to learning rather than continuity of education. It is our continuity of education plan, but he coined it. I really love it. It's very catchy, return to learning. So we've been using that to this day. Many of my administrators, like myself included, we didn't use a lot of vacation time last summer. We rolled up our sleeves and we were busy all summer long preparing for the start of the school year. Exactly what Chester County did as well, with health and safety plans and a lot of precautions around the building and getting things established for the start of the school and submitting our plans to Harrisburg as well. Now we came up with 3 models serving 16 districts. Our first preference was the BCTC hybrid model, which all 16 districts would follow. Well, guess what? That's just like putting a common calendar together. If you're a shared time CTC, it's almost impossible. So what we came up with was, if a school is going to be fully virtual, they're going to follow our hybrid schedule, which is 2 days in person and 3 days remote. And it would not be on a Wednesday. We tried to purposely keep our load a little bit lighter for teachers, knowing that they were going to have a group of students versus live and in person, and then also be responsible for students back home. We also said that if the district goes hybrid on their hybrid schedule, we would honor their in-person day. So if they're in person at the district, they're in person with us. And then we also had a few districts that were starting the year with full in-person 5 days a week. So we served them as well. So it was pretty remarkable. And our teachers are just knocking it out of the ballpark. I mean, we are constantly complimenting them on the work they're doing. But I also have to give a shout out. We mentioned those technology integrators early on. They are really the folks behind the scenes that it's driving this done. You might have been in a session with Mike Stein. He's one of our technology coaches, just done a phenomenal job in leadership at BCTC, and a number of folks that have really risen to the occasion to really help us through what would be normally some of the dark hours of the pandemic. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Stauffer.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Kraft. So again, I'll just kind of, piggyback a little bit on what Dr. Kraft had shared with the continuity of education, health and safety plans. They were really the main component over the summer. And I think what was so great about the continuity of education plan is that is continuing to develop to this day. And we continue to make updates and edits to that. And just about all of that comes directly from our staff. So I know earlier Dr. Kraft had mentioned that we would do pretty much daily in the beginning of this whole thing. We will do daily meetings at the end of the day, these check-ins that we called admin Q&As, and they were voluntary for the staff, and we would get just about the entire staff that would log in at 3 o'clock, and it would just be an opportunity for them to share concerns, share their struggles, what questions with what was going on. If we had any updates, we could share that and have have the whole faculty present for that. So that is where a lot of our continuity of education plan was derived from, and that really turned into a roadmap of what the expectations are, what we need from students, what we want to see from students. And then again, over the summer, we took that, we had a focus group of faculty, and again assessed what we ended the school year with and made adjustments going into the current school year. And then again, as Dr. Kraft had shared, we certainly did. We spent an awful lot of time developing a hybrid schedule that we felt would accommodate 16 sending schools, and in the end, that was not the case. So we certainly went back to the drawing board and came up with a new plan that would work with the 16 sending schools. And what that ended up doing for us was turning us into, we have about 30 to 35 different groupings of students now that come into our buildings on any given day. So with the 16 schools, it all depends on how they're broken down, how their alphabet is, what days they're sending. Some are Monday, Tuesday, some are Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, some are 4 straight days, some are 4 days on, 6 days off. So it's all over the place. And, our teachers are just, absolutely remarkable and very, very resilient. And the way that they've been able to handle this and, really just kind of, buckle down and charge forward and are, offering all kinds of suggestions as far as what we can do to improve this whole process. All of that then gets turned into this continuity of education and the learning plan. So we are very, very fortunate that we have the staff that we have. Again, talking a little bit about the high flex model, we did want to guarantee 2 days of in-person learning every week, and we've certainly been able to do that. We do have an opportunity too, where our staff does deliver live instruction while they are working with the student in their classroom. So kind of going into talking a little bit about the in-service then for August. So again, working with our instructional coaches, we were able to take the needs of our staff and what they need and what they were asking for through our professional development process management team and embed that into our August in-service. And we did it in such a way through the help of our instructional coaches where a menu was created. And there wasn't just one session that happened during a time slot. There were about 5 or 6 that happened every single time slot throughout the 4 days of professional development. And during that, those instructors were able to kind of bounce around and get the instruction or get the professional development and what they needed. So we had purchased high definition portable cameras for them. And so this was going to be something that was new for them because now they're going to have students both in front of them and online and how to best use those. So we had sessions regarding that. We had sessions regarding just how to use the camera in general. And then also another session for teaching practices. Again, we had enlisted the help of our technology mentors, our instructional technology coaches, and then also our Schoology champion to develop that. Another interesting piece of their August in-service was going into the year on August 21st, we made a change. So we were supposed to start with students on the 24th of August. And on the 21st, we pivoted from 2 days of in-service to 4 days, pushed the start of the school year back 2 days. And again, that was all, a lot of that was driven from our sending schools who were doing very much the same. So we had moved 2 Act 80 days from prior to Thanksgiving and moved them up into August. And we're really able to create 4 days of some really worthwhile in-depth professional development that allowed the teachers, again, to get what they need to feel prepared going into the school year. So I'm going to throw it over to TCHS to talk about how they open back up.
Sure, I'm going to just quickly move along here, but August, September, I mentioned earlier that we were planning on a hybrid return because that's what our districts were planning on, much like yourselves. We were going to honor their days that they would have attended here. If they were virtual, we created a schedule for them. However, early August rolled around, and as school board meetings occurred, there was a decision by all of our districts to go virtual. So we created a hybrid schedule, worked with our districts to transport students here, again, based on space and our safety plan, and frankly, at that point, instructor availability. With all of our schools going virtual, we then had to scramble to find substitutes for teachers that needed to take leave in order to take care of their own children. A couple things I would point out that we pushed, all of our teachers are now using Remind, because Jim, you mentioned how parents appreciated the messages to their phone. We recognize that the best and easiest way to have teenagers communicate is via their cell phone. Remind is an app that is used by teachers, allowing them to communicate back and forth in a safe manner with students and parents. I would highly recommend investigating, and oh, by the way, free, investigating Remind or another such app as a teacher and as a school. Frankly, I use it for our staff as well to send out messages. It's just easy. I'm gonna pass the baton to Kirk quick to talk a little bit more about the PD and the rest.
Yeah, we realized that we needed to continue with the technology professional development, particularly when we were looking at this hybrid approach and recognizing that we wanted our teachers to be able to teach synchronously. So we then looked at how we could redeploy some of our internal technology, but also what we needed to order in the way of supporting teachers being able to literally live stream their classrooms. So we were purchasing the swivel cameras, some OWL cameras. We were purchasing some GoPro cameras and working with the teachers on how to utilize their tools that were already in the classroom, the iPads and or their computers, to be able to video and live stream their lessons in that virtual hybrid type of environment. And again, it was important to us to make sure that all the staff around the teaching element understood how that worked as well. So support staff were getting introduced to those tools, our project staff or a guidance counselor, folks that we knew could assist in the learning process. We wanted to make sure they understood what their teachers were needing to utilize in order to effectively deliver in an in-person, hybrid, virtual type of environment. And as Dave described, building that schedule, you know, we worked with our, what we call our customers, you know, our districts, our customers, our students, our direct customers. So we really wanted to be flexible, and we waited and we waited and we waited. And we oftentimes talked about the fact that we're building the airplane in flight, which many of you probably did. But we ultimately wanted to try and what we called landing the plane so that we could come up with that schedule. And that was, as Dave indicated, once board meetings were held and decisions were made, that became our kind of step off point, and that's where we developed this hybrid schedule. So again, it became very important to make sure that our teachers understood how to utilize technology, and we still revisited the whole concept of our families and our students being able to access it, particularly if they were going to be in person for maybe 2 days and then virtually online for 3 days of the week. So that schedule of an in and out became the balance of how we were able to utilize technology effectively. And there were costs, you know, the technology that we purchased in order to have synchronous learning, and knowing that those lessons were also taped so that a student could watch them asynchronously at another time based on how their districts might be doing a virtual learning environment. That became a piece of making sure that we had the capacity to store and make those available to the students through the teacher's learning management system. And unlike Berks, we have multiple learning management systems, but you know, we're finding that we're working towards probably a more common approach. And one of those lessons learned for us is if we have everybody maybe in a common learning management system and looking at what our districts are utilizing as well, so that our students are familiar with it. I'll stop there in the interest of time and keep us moving on here.
The one thing I'll point out as well, Kirk, is that the cost of the technology were not the only cost. I mean, it's still at this time we're having to get more licenses and more software, because as our teachers move more towards engaging students online in addition to in the lab setting, there's the need for, frankly, there's the need for them to have other materials that are online in order to engage those students. So that was another cost that really was not anticipated.
Yes, agreed.
I'm going to jump ahead here. Dr. Kraft, do you want me to start the video now, or do you want to just introduce it really quick?
Let it roll. Thank you.
All right.
Dr. Stauffer.
Thank you. So we hope you enjoyed that. So the timing was absolutely perfect. In the chat, I see a question regarding how to balance that and how do the teachers balance the in-person instruction with the live instruction. And it is, if there's any administrators on this call and you haven't had an opportunity to get into a classroom and see that, boy, do I highly encourage that. It is absolutely fascinating to watch what they pull off and how they do it. The person you saw in the video was a lot of one of our cosmetology instructors down in Noecker at the East Campus, and it is secondhand nature to them at this point. So with the cosmetology hours that these instructors need to, or these cosmetology students need to get throughout the course of their program, we had to come up with a way that this was going to be meaningful and be able to do it online and both in person, because if you were just to wait in person, till you had students in person to deliver your theory, you would very, very quickly get behind in your content and where you needed to get in your curriculum. So what they have done was they have created a system where they have the students who are virtual, they're projected up on the screen. Then they have the students who are in the class, and the teacher interacts with both of them seamlessly. The students interact with one another seamlessly. So when there's questioning, informative assessments taking place in class, they're taking place with both the online and with the in-person students exactly at the same time. And again, they are conversing with one another when they're doing demonstrations. They're doing demonstrations at home with their cosmetology kits. And this is happening in many, many classrooms. And it is just absolutely fascinating to watch. And if you were to tell teachers in January of last year that this is what they're going to be doing starting the school year, would imagine a lot of them would have probably just thrown their hands up and walked away because it was incredibly scary to even think about. And now you kind of get into these classrooms now and you see what they're doing, and it's unbelievable what they have pulled off and how resilient they are to doing that. Talking a little bit about our instructional delivery format, we kind of covered that already. We have about 35 different groupings of students, and their way that they're managing that is exactly what you just saw. They're using that high flex model and delivering instructions to both the students in person and virtually simultaneously. Again, collaboration and communication was absolutely key to our survival. We would hold those afternoon meetings. Our instructional coaches would hold daily check-ins with teachers. We would hold weekly one-on-one check-ins with every teacher in our building. We would meet on a weekly basis with our instructional assistants and all of our support staff, and just constantly having that feedback. And one of the other great pieces that came out of this is it really brought two campuses together. We've been doing, since the springtime, we've been doing all of our faculty meetings have now not been campus-based, they've been district-based. And everybody is getting the same message. Both of the principals are sharing the communication, and it has really brought the campuses together. So there's a lot of things to fret about or worry about or be upset about with COVID. There's been a lot of great things that have come out of this. It's really changed the way that we communicate. It's going to change teaching, I think, forever. And it really has, broken down a lot of barriers to what we, at one time, very short time ago, didn't really think was going to be possible or feasible. Again, evaluating and modifying the instructional delivery is something that is continuous. And anytime that there are any updates to our plans, those plans do get posted on our website, and then also are pushed out to all of our instructors. And again, just making sure that teachers feel supported through this whole process would certainly, be something that we would encourage all of you to do. And that could be, walkthroughs. We do make an effort to try to be in every single classroom every single day. And that can be, tough sometimes, but it's really important to us to do that. We really want to kind of send the message that our goal is to tear down those barriers and break down those walls and let them kind of focus on, what they do and what they do best. And that's taking care of kids and delivering just outstanding instruction. So by doing that, just keeping that communication going, letting your staff know that you're there for them and continuing to move forward has been something that's been really helpful for us. So I'm going to turn it over to TCHS.
Oh, there goes the video again. Sorry. All right, I'm going to roll our video now and then have a quick discussion.
I think we'll roll this video and then we'll look to wrap things up and see if there are questions.
Well, the consideration has to be given that we have both the virtual, full-time virtual, and in class. So we try to universally deliver to all the students in the same way, if at all possible. So even the students that come into class, they zoom in just like the students at home. So we're all looking at the same thing. So most of our materials are digital. HyFlex does present some challenges where some of the tasks that we need to do really do require materials, hands-on work. So we're solving that problem and gathering together some addresses for the virtual learners. We're going to be shipping out some materials to them, which will give them that opportunity. So that's probably the biggest challenge. They jump right in. So as long as you're getting good attendance, and we've had good attendance with this program, I think it's working out quite well. It's just keeping all those things in mind.
Oh, excuse me.
And you know, looking at the clock, and I'm seeing a couple more questions come in as well. You know, one of the things that you know, Jim and I have spoken frequently. You know, we were oftentimes doing the 7 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. ride to work. Hey, what are you doing? How's it going for you? That kind of stuff. And I always appreciated that partnership and that discussion about what each of us were accomplishing within our different centers. But when you think about where you know, the question on the slide here, where do we go from here? You know, we are constantly evolving in education, and clearly this pandemic has even caused us to, you know, do a deeper dive and look at how we're evolving and what does that future look like. You know, I've told my staff, I've told my leaders, I don't anticipate that we're going back to pre-March 13th. You know, we have to plan to move forward with career and technical education, as I'm sure all of you are in your settings. Jim, I don't know if you have any additional closing that we can wrap up a little bit and try and be able to take some questions from some folks.
Yeah, that's the most important thing, but I totally agree that we're not moving back in time. We hit the fast forward button on March 13th, and you know, schools have been criticized for years for not being up with it, and I really got to say that I've seen example after example where everybody's working diligently to make up for some lost time, and we're really, the future is bright. We're really excited about what we have in store with our teachers and, you know, professional development. One of the fears we have is that we don't have substitutes to come in our buildings to sit in the place of a teacher and do what our teachers are doing right now. That's going to be a big concern for many of us as we move forward. But thank you for your time. Let's move it forward. Thank you.
A couple questions in the chat. The one lesson I've learned, I'm going to stop the slideshow now, if that's okay, gentlemen.
Yep.
Here's what I've come to realize is that every CTE instructor worked in the field before they came to education, and we're all problem solvers. And what they've been dealt is just another problem, and they're finding solutions. The solutions are rarely coming from myself or Dr. Williard. I'm sure it's the same in your buildings, guys. And they're running a bias and saying, what do you think if? And sometimes the answer is, yeah, run with it and find out, or let me check on if we can do that. But that's where I've been truly impressed, is just their desire to solve the problem. And oftentimes the problem is my students aren't learning this the way they would have otherwise, or they're not coming to school the way they would have otherwise. And they're seeing the struggles of students and figuring out how to solve those struggles. Couple other questions that were brought up. Mike, you asked about eSchool data and how we're using it.
Sure, so I can take that.
Go ahead.
So eSchool data, Mike, is basically our new student management system. So we're kind of pretty deep into this in January, February, March last year. So when this whole thing hit, it was just one more challenge for us to overcome. Certainly wouldn't recommend it. If we knew we were going into this, we probably would have pushed it off a year to do the changeover. But again, we're too deep into it, and they have been absolutely fantastic to work with. They're a great organization. We've been getting an awful lot of support with them because, and again, they're dealing with a lot of the same issues we are. A lot of remote stuff and so on and so forth. But we're just using that as our student management system that replaced Classmate.
There's also a question, really, I think a lot of people ask, how are our teachers doing this realistically? The high flex is the tricky one. And the reality is they're, like I said, problem solving. Dr. Willard mentioned the swivel cameras, the owls.
One of the things
I'll jump
in real quick. One of the things that we were able to accomplish through our board meeting and group with the superintendents within the last 10 days is I got all my districts to agree to preserve Wednesdays as a virtual only Wednesday. because in looking at our teachers and walking through our buildings, they are literally worn out. We're only at the end of the first marking period. And so we realize if we're expecting them to teach a group of students at home and a group in person, the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday in person needs to be in person. So we're using Wednesdays, and we're giving them a variety of things that they can do on Wednesdays. But one of the things we want to see is build a repository of lessons, demonstrations, those kinds of things. So virtual only Wednesdays, that's one of the things that we added. It's brand new, and we want to hold on to that as long as we can. So teachers hit it hard Monday, Tuesday, virtual Wednesdays. They're preparing lessons. They do Thursday, Friday. They have the break on the weekend. They absolutely need that. I see that in the eyes of our, not only our teachers, our administrators as well. And then the other thing is we've also made a commitment. If we were to go virtual 100% with all of our districts, we still want to find some way to allow our teachers to come in and have access to their labs, to do their demonstrations, broadcast their lessons. We realize if their own children are home and they have to watch them, that might not be possible, 5 days a week. But we do want to make sure our teachers, we're not in that situation that all of us were in last March to June where nobody was allowed in the building. We want to try to make that, preserve that so that we can have quality lessons.
And just as a closing on our last slide, I know it came up quickly, but all the four of us as presenters and panelists agreed that grassroots collaboration is critical in developing and having open communication. Everybody in your organization needs to be or feel that they're part of that team. They're part of the decision making. And the more that you do that, the more generation of ideas and strategies that bubble up. And now, as administrators, we support what those needs are. I constantly walk the building and say, A, first, thank you very much. B, what do you need to help you do your job better? Please let us know. And that's a key piece to that. So